Alrighty. So my paper is vertical up and down. So make sure that you have that in the right orientation. And just a note, I draw darker because I care most about you seeing it on your screens. But if you have a little bit of a lighter hand and don't press as hard, then it's easier for you to erase things as needed. So, with your pencil and have your handy dandy eraser nearby as well, I'm going to do a little bit of marking to see where do I want our panda to be living. So that I'm really zoomed out here for just a moment so that you can see top to bottom. This looks about good. I want some space below. And up top, where is the panda? I can do you want to put the reference photo in the chat or
I'll grab it and I'll pop it in the chat.
okay, thank you. All right, so our panda, which will appear shortly on our paper as we draw it, is going to be living between these two lines that I have put here. And the reason that I start like this is it's much easier to move just a little marking here and there than if we had started to draw it and then been like, oh, I really want to move that. So that's my thinking with this. Okay. And to start off in a very sketcherly way with the head, I'm going to basically do like an egg shape. We will refine this as needed. Go. And always feel free to erase anything you don't need. So that's about a good size for a head. And I've still got enough room from this egg shape to this bottom for the body to be sitting in. And we can bring our pencil in here for like a big swoop. And as you're putting this down, if you don't want to go all the way to the line that you guessed it would be at, you can absolutely change that up. I think that that is looking all right. Just gonna zoom in a little more. Okay. And I want to go over here with my pencil, right behind that head, and add this little line And then we can erase that line that was right there originally. So now I've got a nice little gap. And I'm going to turn that line that we just did into a like backwards L. And then we can turn that into the arm. And you'll see as you make like little changes here and there that sometimes moving something like just a millimeter really ends up helping the shape. So do feel free to play around with that. Does anyone need a moment? Okay, I think we do need a second, so I will let you have that. Okay, so I'm gonna go back in here and I just want to erase the edge of that egg shape so that it does not be a continuous oval and the other arm is actually up and holding that piece of bamboo. So I want to start like that. And I want to sketch in where it's black. And we're going to look at the bottom. And I want you to do like a little pizza slice. Little pizza slice right here. And then we are going to add another oval right below this. So that's going to be the foot there.
Victoria, we're getting a request to pause for just a sec.
Yes.
All right. Are people good to keep going? Okay.
All right. And we want to put in that other leg. Now it does get covered by a bunch of bamboo as well, but we can see like the makings of it under there. Um, this kind of looks like a little piece of a chicken drumette. That's the kind of shape that I got. And if you feel like you need to make any adjustments, like I think that my little arm here maybe could go a bit further down. almost done with our drawing. And next, I want to put in the little ears. And I just want to bring this curve a little bit more in here so that we have a gap, and that looks like the neck in between here. And I want to go in around here and do like a little curve. It almost looks like a gourd, be a nice spaghetti squash. And then you'll do two little circles for the eyes. Now, the right eye needs to be lower than the left eye. So here's the angle that I'm looking at. And we can just do a little shape around the eye. That's going to be black there. And a little nose. Okay. And last thing I want to draw is if you could do like a curve here, which is going to be for the hand. And then add in this bamboo piece. And I'm going to give everyone a minute to do any sort of fixing or just cleaning up. Does anyone still need a moment or two? Okay, I think we are all set. So, if you have never painted with watercolor before, there are two main techniques, and they are called wet on wet and wet on dry. And all that is talking about is, are we getting the paper wet first before we go in with the paint? Your brush always has to be wet to touch the watercolor paint. If you take your dry brush and touch paint, nothing is going to happen. So like I've got some blue right here. No water's on my brush. Nothing happened. So brush always has to be wet. Paper can be dry or wet. So we are going to start with wet on wet for the background. And what I'm doing is I'm taking my brush. I have now dipped it in water and I'm putting water behind the panda. So you go right up to your drawing and then out a little bit further. Now, how far out you want to go is going to depend on you and your preference. If you saw the reference photo in the chat, the panda kind of has like a halo, like a vignette around. So some of the paper does not have to get wet for that to happen. So that's what I'm gonna go for. But if you don't like that style, feel free to get all of the background wet. Completely up to you. So you can see where it's shiny is where I am putting the water down. So that is wet all around. And I'm going to start with some yellow ochre. It kind of looks like gold, like a golden Dijon mustard in your palette. Are you soaking the brush? Um, I'm just dipping the brush in water. If when you put water down, not a lot is coming on, maybe you need to get a little bit more. And it shouldn't be like a river. You can see how shiny mine is. Um, but if I hold it up, nothing runs. And if you see that it dried, it could be just like a humidity thing, depending on how much humidity is in the air where you are. So you might just have to get it a little more wet. So with the yellow ochre, I'm touching that. Now again, my brush is always wet, and I'm just bringing that yellow ochre right down underneath, and I'll let that be. Okay, and then while this is still wet, I want you to get some of that light blue. It's called cerulean blue. Kind of looks like a sky color. I want you to get some of that on your brush and bring that in the background here. And you can give it a little scrubby scrub at those edges if you don't want them to be hard. That kind of gives it a little blend. Completely up to you. Okay. Does anyone need more time on what we've done so far? Yep, no problem. All right. We're good in the chat, but does anyone else need a moment? Awesome. Okay, we are gonna do our first color mixing. And in the center of your palette, there's a big circle. You can use that for this color mix. I'm going to use this little palette I've got here. And we're going to make the color black together. So black is burnt umber. So there's a nice brown in that palette and indigo. And depending on if it's a little bit washed out, that indigo, it might just look like there's a black in the palette already, but it's a dark, dark blue. I just put that in the chat in case anyone needs to reference that. So brown and blue. I'm going to start bringing my burnt umber over where I make my black, which for me in my palette is this whole square. So get your brush wet and then go over that burnt umber. Start bringing it into a good mixing spot. This is all my burnt umber. And then I'm going to start bringing my indigo into this. And while you're mixing this, if you're looking at this mixture and going, this still looks a little bit too brown, then you just need to add a little more of that indigo. And if it looks green, that's a little bit too much of the blue, and you can add more brown. And I'm going to swatch this on a scrap piece of paper for you. So you can see how that makes a nice black color. Does anyone have any questions about that color mix or need any help? I think we're good. All right. So my brush is awesome. My brush is actually pretty dirty from that mix. Um, and I want to just slightly darken up this background. So I'm just taking that black and really watering it down, like I'm just tapping my brush into water. But if you like how it's just, blue and you think that that looks fine, no worries. You do not have to add a gray wash here. Now, I will say that this is so far the darkest thing on this painting. So it does, look a little bit striking when you put it down. But once we get the actual panda painted in, this will not look as dark as it currently does. Okay, I'm gonna stop messing with that there. And the last thing I want to do is take some of that burnt umber and put it underneath the panda at the bottom. I will give everyone a moment. If anyone needs any help, just let me know. Does anyone need a moment? Okay. So if you did this gray wash over on top of that blue, um, what that made the blue become is more of an undertone. So it just looks different than if we had just put gray over this. And speaking of undertones, I would like to go into the panda now. I'm really zooming in here. And I want to just put a little bit of water right at this edge and this edge. And then you can lightly touch your rose madder and bring that in here. And I'm giving it just a little scrub at that bottom edge, just so that we don't get a harsh line. Thank, thank you, Amanda. All right. And we can do that same thing with a little bit of the cerulean blue right at the base here. Okay. And I want to take that cerulean blue and go underneath. Now that's really pretty dark, but as soon as you come in with a little bit of water, this is right underneath that nose. Take a little bit of water on your brush, it will just blend it on out and it's not so dark. And I have just a little oopsie on my paper, which I'm very happy about because it's gonna give me a chance to show you how I fix it. So nobody needs to be doing this with me. This is just an example of how I fix things. Um, some of the background here came into this face, and that is one of the white parts. So we don't want that. Now I am taking a smaller brush just because of how tiny this area is. But if you ever need to fix something in a watercolor painting, you take your bristles and you point it towards where you want to push that edge. So I don't want this to be here. I want it to go that way. So I just have a little bit of water on my brush and I'm lightly scrubbing. And now you can't even tell that it was there. Um, something something similar happened up here. Now I don't really care about it because it's going to be black anyway that year, but just as another example so you can see it again. Scrub, scrub, scrub. And it's never going to be 100% just the white of the paper again. But it does look better. Definitely better than not doing it. So I do like it when I have a little oopsie for that reason. Um, so we are doing really good here. I would like to start getting the black in the actual areas of this panda. But before we do that, we've kind of been working some undertones already. I want to do that again. This is wet on dry because it's really tiny of an area. This is the rose color, so this is gonna look almost like a cotton candy panda for a minute. But we're gonna trust the process. So I'm putting this rose madder right down in here. And a little on this knee. This is all going to get covered up by the black, but it's going to make it look like it's not just black. It's going to give us some differences. And then once again with that cerulean. Okay, so we've got our rose and our cerulean in here. And I just want to check that it's dry in this center of the belly, which it is for me. If it's not for anybody, please let me know. And it's also dry in the background. Okay, I think everyone's good. And we're gonna take that black that we mixed together, and this is where it's gonna all start really coming together. So remember when I said that the background was the darkest thing we had on our paper? That is no longer the case. When we come in with this black, that is quite stark. So again, this is wet on dry, and I'm doing it wet on dry because I don't need it to go everywhere in a huge area. This is a very concentrated area. And so that's why I chose wet on dry. And if anybody needs to make more black, it is burnt umber and indigo. And then bringing this black into the legs as well. And I'm just getting it black kind of at this base and giving it a little scrub just so that it's more of like a shadow than anything. And as this is drying, I just want to bring a little more black, like right to this edge, so that that oval shape, since it's a little bit lighter, it pops out a bit more. Same thing for this underneath the hand. Just get that a little darker so that it has a difference there. And you can do the same thing wet on dry for the ears. And you can do the black for the nose. And if you just maybe dip your brush in water and tap it on a paper towel, just so that this is what I like to call painting with dirty water. So this is not as dark as the other black that we've been using. You can give it a little blend with a clean, damp brush. That's going to help the other white parts of that are just the paper to kind of stand out a bit. And you can get it a little bit dark around the eye. So not as dark as the other parts, more like a middle. And I'm gonna let that dry. We do need to do the eyeballs, but we'll do those um in a moment. Does anyone need a little bit of time before we keep going? Okay, I think we're all good. So there is a sap green in your palette, and we're gonna mix another green color, but I want to start out with that sap green. And what I'm gonna do is go like underneath this panda and start doing very linear strokes. And what I like to say is that the quicker that you kind of get this down and don't think about it, the better it usually ends up looking. This is just the sap green, and I'm starting to add some foliage. If it's too wet in an area for you to do this right now, that's fine. You can just pop it in a different place. So don't go um too crazy with it because we are gonna put two different kinds of green down here in a moment. Um and for the eyeballs, if you are looking at these eyes and saying, I can't paint in that tiny little, you know, place, you could take like a Sharpie, like an extra fine point Sharpie, like one of these kinds of pens, and go in with that. You can also take the black paint. That's what I'm gonna do. And the trick here is to leave a little spot of the white of the paper so that we get a little reflection in the eyes there. And if you lose that little white of the paper spot, you can online or at a craft store, they sell these little white gel pens for not very expensive at all, but it's like my favorite little trick to pop a white dot in an eye if I lose it. So there is a fix if you lose your reflection. Does anyone need a moment before we start mixing our other two greens? Yes? Okay, no problem. Is it okay to keep going? Awesome. Okay, great. So now that we're done with the black, we're gonna take that black and use it to make a darker green. So what I'm gonna do is bring my sap into this black and then a little bit extra indigo. So the black mixture that we made earlier, I'm taking a little bit more sap and an extra pinch of indigo. I'm going to give you a little swatch. Oops, sorry about that. That definitely looks more green than the black. And we can take that darker green and bring that into the stuff that we've already started. So it kind of gives it like a shading. And our last color mix. And then we are done with an optional splatter part, which I'll talk about in a moment. I want to mix one more green color, and I want to take the yellow ochre and add a little bit of the sap. If you need to use a little bit of blue instead, you can add a teensy, teensy drop of indigo, and that'll be just fine. And that's a nice olivey green. So especially once you put it actually on the paper, it definitely looks different than the sap and that dark green. Repeat that,
All
please.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, oh, gotcha. Um, so we did a mix of yellow ochre and sap green to make this olive color, and I just put it in a couple of places. You can kind of see the differences, like that brighter stuff is sap, the darker stuff is that dark green, and then this more muted color is the olive that we just mixed. And you can just place that anywhere you'd like. Kind of, I'm just fixing something on mine. There we go. And you can say, I like my panda as is. I don't want to do anything else to this. And that is perfectly fine. However, I do love to show the splatter technique, and I think that this is a really good candidate for that. Um, so if you would like to splatter, you can watch me do this first. I take my brush and I get it soaking wet. Like you can see how shiny that is. And I get a bunch of the green. This is the Sap Green. Right on this, you can see that the brush is just completely green. And I'm really going to zoom that out there. And you can flick. I'm putting my wrist into it. You can also go like tap, 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 and get some tinier dots. I also like to splatter just water because I feel like that sometimes just gets it to blend a bit more. Can we use a different color? Absolutely. I'm gonna also use some of that cerulean blue. I think that's a good. My suggestion is use the colors that are that we've, done here. Like if you mixed rose and cerulean together and made purple, that might not really go with it. So as long as it's something predominantly used in here, I think that it works just fine. It kind of brings it all together. Um, like that's some yellow ochre I just splattered. Splatter that dark green. And you can also say, I don't want to do this at all. And that is fine. And the nice thing is that if you don't like something, just tap it on up. And that is our little panda friend. Um, we still have some time left. Maybe if you wanted to stop the recording and if people wanted to hold theirs up and share and not be camera shy,